All right, welcome to the Operators Pod. We are talking all things people today. It is probably one of the most requested things I have gotten as a topic. Every time I look for, I go to our community in Slack to ask them, what do you guys want to hear about? It always comes down to some version of, should I hire this role? Do you have a person that does this? Does anybody know a person? It's always people. Clearly, the business of business is people. You'll hear me say this over and over and over again. Let's get into it.
What's up, everybody? I use Fulfill. Fulfill is my ERP, my order management software. It does EDI for me. So what do all those things mean? If you are a small Shopify merchant, you probably hook your Shopify up to a 3PL or a warehouse, or maybe you're running fulfillment yourself out of your garage. We did that at one point. Orders come in, orders go out pretty easy. Where it gets difficult is when you're tracking multiple inventory sources. So like different factories making the same stuff with different costs, different components coming in. That ends up being a pain for accounting. And then also different inventory sources going to customers. So if you have 3 warehouses and it's not just going to Shopify, it's going to Amazon, it's going to wholesale, it just ends up being a lot of different information to pass around. And how do you make sure that runs smoothly without just throwing bodies at the problem? That's what Fulfill solves. So it's an ERP. There's a couple ERPs in the industry. NetSuite is the big one, and ask anyone who's ever used NetSuite if they're happy, and they will say no. I am happy with Fulfill. We are using it. ERPs are a hard, messy business because it's so many different parties passing a lot of information, but it ends up being the nervous system of your entire company, right? Like if something fucks up on Amazon, I feel it because of Fulfill. So it's the ERP uniting everything. It also does EDI, right? So this is a little more technical, but Best Buy, Nordstrom's, all of these people, when they place orders, it's coming into your system via EDI, and nobody knows how that works. Like no 3PLs have it figured out. It is just an old archaic system that I naively thought would take a week to set up, but no, it can take months to set up and actually test that it's working perfectly. Fulfill does all that. It sets up EDI integrations and then it stays with Fulfill. So you can switch warehouses, you can switch inventory sources without having to redo EDI integrations, which is the death of a lot of companies. So if you're shipping stuff to people from multiple locations, eventually you'll need an ERP. I use Fulfill and I've been happy with it. They're a sponsor of the podcast. All 3 sponsors I personally use. So interact with Ridge and you will see how we're using these sponsors. So thank you, Fulfill. Talk to you later.
You know what I hate is the idea of quiet quitting, and I do think in a world with remote, there's more of that kind of stuff of like, I'm just going to kind of, stop working until they wise up,
Well, I mean, I'm glad we're talking about people. I think there's a thing in companies where like leadership won't fire people anymore. You always hear about like reduction in force, you hear about layoffs, and like I think it's just people who found the easiest way to take the medicine. Like they're taking like the cherry flavored cough syrup where it's like, dude, people get fired. If people suck at their jobs, they get fired. Like everyone's so scared of like the ramifications, but it's like, hey, look, you're not doing good. Do you want to work at a job you suck at? No. So like, let's find you something else.
It's a risk thing, right? Like, I don't know what it's like in the States. I mean, I do a little bit, but in Canada, our employment law kind of like rules above all law. It's like marriage and then employment. And then everything else is after those two. So as a company, you really have to be careful with terminating somebody with cause. So like reduction in workforce, if you lay off a bunch of people, is much easier to do with lower risk than it is to like terminate somebody with cause. Like you need to document the shit out of that process leading up to a termination so that you're going into it saying like performance, this is the reason. It's got to be performance, right? Like, or something else, something that is like documented and you can stand up in front of a judge and defend. So it's terrifying for entrepreneurs up here.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to the conversation we had like a couple of days ago where it's like, what's the advantage of W-2 employees then? It's like, why do they make it so difficult? I mean, luckily, California, where I am right now, and most states in the US are at will states, meaning like your employment is at both of your guys' choice, even though there can be litigation or whatever. And this person we fired was for cause. They just weren't doing their job. But anyway, it's just something like, yeah, like because we're letting the legal dog wag the tail or the tail wag the dog, whatever that is, it's like, sometimes people suck and you should just fire them. But
here's my thought on that. And it's like, you don't have to be like a heartless capitalist to say like, hey, when somebody's not working out, they should immediately be let go, because if they're not working out, then they're not going to be at the company long term. Eventually, it's not going to happen. And it's like, the quicker you help them find something that can work for them, the better. You know, it's better. It's not just better for the company. It's better for both people that if it's not working out there, or if they don't have a long-term future there. And that was a pretty big, you know, because I can probably, as contrast to you guys, I get a lot more invested in the personal side. I'm really connected to the people in the company. And I've had a couple situations where I've been too slow probably to move on something because I cared about the people so much. And for me, it was a pretty important unlock to realize like, hey, I'm actually not doing them any favors by keeping them around. If this isn't their long-term, you know, fit, I need to help them move towards the best fit for them as quickly as possible.
Mike, can I ask you a more personal question on that statement?
Sure.
Do you think that you're that way because you have such a strong faith in church community that like by default that your programming tends to like be over there?
That's a great question. I wonder how much it's, I wonder how much of it is faith, how much of it's the in-person and the way that we've hired. I mean, I will say generally, there's kind of a philosophical, like, what do you think the social contract is between companies and the people they employ and the communities they're in? And I generally have a higher view of the responsibility that companies have. I think we live in an era where listen, throughout all of human history, if you had a business, you were very rooted to kind of the community that you were in, right?
Yeah.
And you had a lot of responsibility there. And then I think with the rise of kind of corporations that didn't really, weren't really based anywhere, even if they had their headquarters somewhere, and the rise of technology, there's been less of that. And so it's probably two things. One is that I have a higher view of like, hey, I'm somebody who has an organization that has a lot of money and that matters. And so there's responsibility that comes with that. And then I think some of it's probably like you're saying, there's an element of just like, who's the type of person I want to be. And I do think that's been a guiding principle for me of like, I'm actually, especially at this point, I'm a lot less concerned with how much money I make. I'm a lot more concerned with how do the people that have been around me and worked with me, how do they remember the time? How do I impact the lives of other people? Because there's no more marginal utility in money for me, right? Whether I've got a net worth that's $100 million or $600 million, like I'm not going to functionally do anything differently. But if relationally, if I had a bunch more money, but a lot less relationships and a lot more kind of conflict or kind of broken relationships in my wake, I would not love that. So, but this is, I think it's actually a great primer for everything we're about to go into, because we're about to talk about people. And my main assertion to frame the entire conversation is that this isn't a conversation where it's like, hey, this is the right way to do things, because it's all about what you're trying to optimize for. And I actually think this has been one of the things that makes our podcast really interesting, is that there's, in our Venn diagram of motivations, there's a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of differences between the four of us. And when it comes to how you handle people, the quote unquote right answer for your organization has so much to do with what you're trying to optimize for. And that's different things for different people. And it makes sense. Like Sean, is like 22 and he has no kids. And so that's going to look different. He just wants to be able to do 30 pull-ups, right? Like that's what he's optimizing for in his life. No, but seriously, like
it's a strong nod of approval from Sean.
That is. I did. Sean accidentally posted a picture talking about how he did 20 pull-ups in one of our chat groups last night, which is awesome, by the way.
That's impressive.
I'm
actually.
impressed,
Yeah.
Sean.
Didn't even break a sweat on the 20. I'm 30, so I'm trying to get 30 chin-ups in. I think I could cheat him out right now.
You know how few 30-year-olds can do 30 chin-ups? It would probably put you in the 0.1%, I bet. But,
absolutely.
But anyway, so like, yeah, I think that just for everybody, taking everything you're about to hear is us talking from the perspective of with what we're trying to solve for, what we're trying to optimize for. And I would just make the point that here's the great thing about starting a business is that you get to decide what you optimize for. So anyway, yes, for what I'm trying to optimize for, yeah, Matt, like the relational piece, the community piece matters a lot more to me. And definitely sometimes I trade money to, be stronger in those areas.
Right. I mean, it's the business of businesses, people, and unfortunately people are messy. So it winds up being a topic that's very personal. It's all about style. And yeah, I like that. What are you optimizing towards? What do you think, Sean?
I just want to say that, the most cliche thing you'll ever hear running a business is people. People is everything. People's the only thing that matters. And I was like, that's not true. You know what matters? Product. You know what's true? Marketing. And then like eventually you hit a point where you're like, oh God, they were right. Like people it's the only thing that actually scales any amount of effort. The reason why I think I'm more cavalier about like letting people go is, growing up, I worked retail jobs and hundreds of people would come through a year. Right. It's like if you lost those jobs, it's not like the end of the world. It's not earth shattering. Where I think if you get laid off from Google because you put so much into it, it's become your religion more or less. When you get laid off, it feels like a crime's been committed. Where if you're at the Ralph Lauren outlet mall in Seattle, Washington, and you get laid off, it's like, there's like eight other places. Right. And I think you'd be more clear cut about performance expectations. And if people aren't hitting it, just get them out. But Matt, lead the conversation. We have 4 buckets of people conversations.
Oh, man. Yeah. Okay. So I think for people listening, the way I was thinking about this, because people is a messy topic, but I think we get a lot of questions around, it's a question always in the context of stage of company. So like, how is it different from 1 to 10 million, 10 to 20? 20 to 100, 100 plus. And I started thinking about this conversation we were having, and I'm like, it's really hard for somebody listening. If we were to only answer it, we have to like sort of say, this is the stage that I was thinking about this problem at, right? Or like answering this question at. So like one of the first questions I had for you guys, and try to remember back, because I get this question a lot. I don't know if you guys do, but it's how, as an operator, do you know when to hire someone? Like in any function, like how do you know when to bring somebody on? And then the part 2 to that I see a lot of debate around is this like full-time, I think Sean, you call them W-2s in the States. That's a full-time. So that's a T4 for the Canadians listening. How do you know if it's a full-time person or a freelancer? Do you guys have principles, rules that you use in the company? Like, could be simple, revenue per head, anything at all. Maybe Sean, start with you, and then Mike, and I can kind of give you my view as well.
Okay, so the hardest part about hiring somebody is understanding what successful companies in your cohort look like. I'm going to bring up 2 examples. Today, a person starting who's director of production for our business. She is the first director of production we have ever had. So we've never had someone do that job before. And I wouldn't have hired that person because I didn't know what a director of production was. But my COO, Andres, is like, hey, we need somebody to take products from the product team and shepherd them all the way through manufacturing till the ops team gets them. I was having both teams just kind of like run 50 to 60% of that, right? Like on each side. And he's like, no, there's a person there. It's called the production role. We have to get that person. So that's the biggest challenge whenever you're growing or scaling or hiring, is that like more org charts aren't more available. And I don't know why they are, but like it's getting org charts from your friends is hard as fuck. Like they rarely give them to you. So I wish maybe somebody in the community, we can start putting together like, this is a 1 million, a 5 million, a 10 million org chart. Like here's the roles that are like you typically find, because that's probably been the most limiting thing. Is like my background's marketing performance, right? I joined Ridge when they were already doing like, we'll give it like $5 million or whatever, but they only had 3 employees, father, son, best friend, but there's nobody else who worked there. And like, they mostly did customer service and like products and whatever. And I'm like, oh, you guys need all these marketing roles. So we're going to merge because I have all the marketing roles. My background wasn't ops. If I was ops, I would have been like, you need all these ops roles and you need one marketing person, right? So because of that, our marketing side of the business is actually super fleshed out. We have roles that like you guys don't have. And like we have like, we're doing more in-depth things on that side. But because of that, the ops has been treated as a commodity service in our business. So it's all just like whatever your background and personal preference is. So we can talk about like, we try to have $2 million in revenue per W-2 employee we bring on. So that's like one of like our key metrics. We're a little bit above that right now. And that's when things start to feel shitty and break. And that's where like we're in a hiring sprint right now. We have like 5 open roles, but that's probably too high for most people. If you have too much of an in-person product experience, it's not going to work if you do that. And you should probably hire quicker. And that's the biggest mistake I see with $30 million brands. But I've been monologuing, so I'll kick it over to Mike.
Well, we're actually really similar, Sean. I think we're right at 2 million. I think we found, at least for our business, there's a very similar kind of relationship of once you start getting much above 2 million, people just start to kind of freak out and get burned out. So, in general, I think an interesting dynamic I've seen in our business is that when you need a role, people sense we need somebody else here. When you really, really need a role, often you don't even sense it at all, which is kind of counterintuitive. And this is what Sean's saying, that when you really, really desperately need a role, usually it's because you're totally lacking a skill set in an area and you don't even understand how understaffed or underskilled you are in that area. It's just a total unknown kind of. And so a funny example of this, when we were really early on, maybe 10 employees, I went to my co-founders at one point and said, guys, I've got this guy who is brilliant and I want to bring him in as CFO. And so they said, okay, they met him, spent some time with him, came back and said, you're right. He's awesome. But what's he going to do? And it was like, so in retrospect, it's so funny. Like, it's like, we obviously needed somebody to run the financial side of the organization. Like, we had to have that, but we weren't doing any of that. Like, we were kind of piecing everything together with duct tape. And it was like, why do we need that right now? And then of course, immediately when he gets in, like, there's so many kind of behaviors and areas of the organization that we weren't developing at all that he began to put in place. And so I've seen that a few times where like there's a hire that desperately needs to be made, but we're not even feeling it because we're just not engaging in any of those activities. I think marketing's a good example, Sean. There are some things even now that we probably don't even feel like we need to make a hire, but it's just ignorance more than anything else. You only feel that you need a hire when you have at least some level of competence in an area. I think the other thing is probably the question about when to hire. I've got 2 principles that are helpful. One is that when can you absorb somebody culturally? Every organization has a culture, even as we've talked about on this podcast, those are different. But the more people you try to digest at once, the harder it is to culturally digest it. That's just always true, 100%. And so you want to space it out some, and you want to think about what can your culture kind of handle and assimilate. What you don't want to bring in new hires where they are shaping culture because they start to outnumber. This is the problem with, like, I think as a side note of raising capital sometimes is you go and you raise capital and it's like, oh, okay, we've got a 20-person team. Now we've got the money to go to a 70-person headcount. Well, what do you think is going to happen if you add 50 people? They're going to dictate culture. You're not going to dictate culture. You're going to lose control of it. And then I think the other thing is when you're hiring is, do you have the people in place to train them well and to lead them, early on, Sean, you mentioned this, like when you're a 10-person company, it's like, hey, if you're going to go hire somebody else, not only are you going to keep doing all the things you're doing, but now you have another person that you have to train. And do you have the capacity to do that and do that well? I'm in agreement that I think sooner is better than later, because those dynamics don't get easier as you get bigger. But so there's not necessarily a right answer, but I would be proactive in hiring, and I would space it out as you're growing your organization in order to keep control of culture.
Yeah, I want to. You brought up a really important thing. If you interview really top tier talent, they will ask, "Is this a net new role or is this backfill?" Right? And I think a lot of times we don't even think about that in organizations. Where like we all understand backfilling. It's like, oh, this person left, this person quit. Like I'm gonna get a better person in this, but like we don't really understand or plan for net new role expansion, and that's what like the director of production is, and like that is what. If you're a fast growing $10 million brand right now, you have to actually plot out what is that net role expansion. Cause it's not just like, I'm going to hire some people. It's like, what are they going to do? What are they going to own? And then Mike really had the golden nugget that bringing people into your organization makes your life worse for like 4 months. Like there's a 4-month ramp up before your life even gets better. And by that point, you're bringing on somebody else new. But Matt, how do you think about hiring?
Brain damage. Like that's basically what it comes down to for me. So, and what you guys are hitting on is, yeah, look, smaller teams are better. That is just like a truth in business. So like it requires less administration to run small teams. Unfortunately, as a business scales, you can't stick with that. Like you have to build people, right? People's like probably the greatest leverage point in a business. Look, I think not all roles scale linearly. Like you don't need to hire more people with more scale in every function of the business. Like our ops side of our business is fairly lean, but that's because I think our channel diversity is also fairly slim at the moment. Right. But like when we add a new channel, it almost always means we're going to add people because we're adding complexity to the business, and that human beings right now are the best way to handle complexity. So I think like Sean, it's not surprising to me to hear that you are now putting in like a production person because of all of the product that you guys have launched and, you know, your future product roadmap. And then think of like all the markets and channels that you guys are opening up. You're moving a lot of shit around the world. That is going to require somebody to like be accountable for that. So I think for me, it's mostly about products, channels, and markets. That's the trigger of like, when do I start thinking about like, do we need to add a net new headcount? I actually hadn't thought about this like ignorance angle that you guys bring up. Like you don't actually know the function you need to, you don't know what you don't know. My default to that is just to go bug you guys and everybody else on my network. It's like, who do I know that's really good at like XYZ thing? And I just go bug the shit out of them. And I'm like, tell me about your org. Like I was doing this with Jeremy a few weeks ago. Like I'm new to this. Like what roles can you put elsewhere in the world? I just default to hiring people in my backyard. And then Jeremy just like shows me his org chart and my brain melted. I'm like, I did not know that this was possible, like what he does. Now it's a very extreme end of things, but that sort of like network piece is how I've crossed that gap. I don't know how many times, man. I just like go bug somebody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Operator's Northbeam ad unit. So 30 seconds, I'm going to tell you all about how if you have any problems with Northbeam, you can directly message Austin, the CEO. He is there. He will set up your ad account. He will make your bet. He'll give you cookies. Really, they have a dedicated team of people, probably 30, 40, 50 reps at this point, who will make sure Northbeam is working correctly and functioning so you can get amazing data out of this ecosystem. They will be more hands-on than any meta rep will ever be, and they're going to help you understand where your ad dollars are best spent, best positioned, and which ads are working. My team works with the Northbeam team literally every day. They're in my Slack. Maybe you don't get the same level of support as an operator, but they will be there to make sure it's working. And if you're not happy at all, just email Austin. He will take care of you. We use Northbeam every day. It's a benchmarking tool. It's super helpful for forecasting, daily pacing, inter-hour pacing. So we can see like if we just launched an ad in 2 hours, if it's working or not. That's what Northbeam does for us. So thank you, Northbeam, for the support. I'm customer probably number one. So thank you so much.
Well, one thing to add regarding Northbeam, because we just went through a contract renewal with them on their specifically on the MMM, and we got a pretty sweetheart deal. And I expect them to come back to us and raise our price, and they kind of deserve it. I was like, let me reach out to the team, and see how it's going, right? Because I'm not in the day to day. I get feedback, and the team was like, they have improved the MMM so much since we started it that they were like, we should definitely pay for this increase. So, and my team hates every agency and most SaaS. The only person that hates SaaS, the only more than my team is Sean Frank. But yeah, I mean, they came to us. They're like, hey, you guys got the sweetheart deal. We were one of the first MMM clients. And I was very, very pleased when my team was like, it's really working well for us. So that's my little MMM plug.
Yeah, let's talk about the ignorance thing again. I think a good example is I bet Mike doesn't have a performance ad creative person on his team.
No.
And he'd be like,
we just started. I mean, isn't that crazy? We're in year freaking 9 and we just started really having a process for performance ad creative. It's insane because it's like you built Ridge on that, and it's like
But it makes sense. Your channel mix is so different from Sean's.
Yeah.
Right.
And
like,
to some extent, the reason why our channel mix is different is because we didn't build that competency. It's like a little bit of a chicken or the egg. Like if we had really great performance marketing people, we probably would have a different channel mix.
Dude,
but
and if my background was wholesale instead of marketing, we'd be a wholesale brand. It's like you only know what you know. And then I want to bring up to a throwback to the Shireen episode. We asked her what was the most important hire you made, and she said an e-com director. And if you're listening to this, that is someone who just manages the workflow of the website, right? Like getting new products up, running tests, that type of stuff. And if you're a small enough brand, you're like, that is just the marketing team's responsibility, right? And like, no, it's like a
small
separate
enough brand. You're just like, that's my responsibility. I'm setting up products in Shopify. Like I remember I've talked about this publicly a few times, but like one of the things that makes this difficult is that as a leader, every time you hire, your job changes a little bit. So like, if you think about it, when you're like ground floor, so I was one of 3 co-founders here. Like I'm the one walking into sales meetings. I'm the one like setting up our Dun and Bradstreet account. I'm the one that's like setting up Amazon ad campaigns. There's nobody else. Like it's like we're doing it all. And then you start to hire people and, Matt, you said this, like, okay, so let's just use the Amazon example. Okay, we finally get to people where like hypothetically I could not be the person running Amazon ads, but I've been doing it for 2 years or whatever. Okay, well, so somebody else is going to run that, but I can't just like hire them and say, here you go. It's like I hire them and now I've got to, over a 4-month period, I've got to run that account and also train somebody else in. And to hopefully be able to hand it off to them, and understanding that, hey, the first couple of months after I hand it off to them, they're probably going to be not as good as me. So as the leader, like I'm actually signing myself up for more work at first with the hope that I have a little bit less work and I have scalability after that.
Can I ask you both? I got a question for you both then on this. When you, again, this is more personal style for people listening. When you guys are looking at functions that like, say there's things that you're doing, this is probably early on in the business, but even now you're hiring a role or you're bringing somebody in to take something off of your plate. How much of that is, this is just what the business needs? And how much of it is, I want to grow as a leader, as an entrepreneur in other areas? So like, it's more selfish and more like, no, I'm trying to level up in a certain area, which means I need to get rid of this. How does that balance play out for both of you? Sean, you're smiling. Go ahead, man.
Well, I just know Mike's kind of a thoughtful answer. And like,
yeah, I want yours though.
Like mine is such like just shitty. Like I don't need to grow anymore. Like if I'm hiring somebody to take stuff off my plate, it's because I don't want to do it. like I'm like, so I still do, and you guys, I've sent screenshots for this. I still do all accounts payable approval. I do the 13-week cash flow. I do the end of month reports, and like it's good because I know exactly what's going on in my business at any point and how these like things work together. And I've done it for fucking 6 years at this point. I'd love to stop, but there's nobody at my company who I think can do it. So we're hiring another VP of finance, and we're going to put more resources to that. And maybe at some point they can start taking that off my plate. But it's not so that I can grow more. Maybe it's so I can just do other shit.
Well, that's what it is, though. It's that, right? It's like, dude, you've actually probably done more of this than you think, though. I've seen your calendar. Your calendar is like wildly empty in a lot of days.
Totally.
Like it's great. That's what you want to see from your CEO.
Sean's calendar and his Twitter account make perfect sense together.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
I've had to delete Twitter off my phone because like one, I think the app's dying. You go on there and it's just people fucking scamming you. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get off this fucking thing. But regardless, Mike, I'd love to hear your thoughtful approach to this.
Well, actually, it's like, I don't think it's really that different. Like, why do you start a business? You start a business to improve your quality of life. Like that's the point, And so one of the ways you can improve your quality of life is by the company, being able to provide an income and hopefully like dividends or profits or whatever. But like, yeah, you should totally optimize for lifestyle. You should totally optimize for happiness and like quality of life. And now, if you're running a public corporation, that's not true. But most of the people that listen to this pod, like these are entrepreneurs. These are people who are building businesses. And I'm a huge believer in that like when it comes to how I spend my day, I want it to be at the intersection of things I enjoy to do, things I'm really good at, and things that drive a lot of value. Right. It's like, if it's not doing one of those things, then like, why am I doing it? And so sometimes that I definitely think over time, my role has obviously shifted a lot. It's gone from where I was doing tons of tactical to like, I do almost no tactical. I don't think I do any tactical at this point. There's like, if I just like went away for 6 months and we didn't try and do anything new strategic, like I don't think a single thing about the business would fall off. But I'm like, when I talk to our management and our ownership group, I'm like, guys, listen, don't complain to me if you don't like anything about your job or anything about your life because you're choosing it. We don't have outside shareholders telling us what to do. We should run the company however we want to run it to enjoy the kind of lives that we want to have. And so I'm definitely take that approach with my time and with the time of all my other leaders. And I think it keeps people in the game quite a bit longer when you take that approach too. Like,
do you, I guess on this topic, was there a size of business like 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 100? When did you feel like the people side was breaking the most?
Yeah, I have a great answer. And this is when I think every company goes out of business. A very passionate founder can muscle a company to like 20 million in revenue without process, without other executives, without people. They can and I've seen this happen straight like 36 times. Like one founder with one channel, with one skill set can just like it's like the meme of like all of the football players trying to stop a guy. He's just step by step getting it done. That person eventually has a brain aneurysm around like 25 to 30 million in revenue. And that's when I've seen a lot of companies go bankrupt, is because, the closest Rich has ever got to go out of business, we were doubling every year. We went from 20 to 30. And there was just like a bunch of shit that happened. Like we had this massive tax bill, like we had, like inventory problems. Like we just were not set up to be a company. We had no finance hires at $30 million. No one at the company had a degree in accounting or did the books or anything, right? Like we were driving the business with like one of the Cybertruck rear view mirrors, like couldn't see shit out of the back. And yeah, like that is like every time I talk to a founder, if they're between 20 and $30 million in revenue, that's when you have the most pain, because When you're above 30, you start being a real company. If you get to $50 million in revenue, there's a lot of exit options. There's people who give you funding. There's a credit crisis right now in ecom we haven't talked about, but like your bank at 50 million will give you money, right? But it's getting to 50 million. You have to use all these other fucked up lenders. So like that is the point where everyone breaks. And the only solution is like to go back in time when you're 10, be less profitable, and like invest in a very strong COO, a very strong CFO, build up teams and process, and then hope the growth continues. But Mike, what's yours?
Well, so I have a model that I stole this from somebody, but I've shared it a bunch online, and it's helped, I think, quite a few people. It helps me, which is if you think about the role of a CEO as like a kind of a progression, that every CEO, if you're a founder, starts out as a player. And then you go to player coach, and then you go to coach, and then you go to something like GM, and then maybe you even go to something like commissioner. So to talk through that progression and why it's relevant to what we're talking about. When you're a player, you have to make the plays. If you're not throwing touchdown passes, they're not happening. Then at some point, it's like for the organization to take the next step, you've got to add pieces around you. Your singular dominance, excellence isn't enough to take the next step. And I think, Sean, with what you're saying, I think that starts to happen somewhere between 10 and 25 million for most e-com brands. That to go that next step, you have to become a player coach. You've got to start going and hiring other pieces. And now you're kind of like maybe still like the quarterback, but you're also calling the plays. You're calling the plays. You're telling the wide receiver what he needs to be doing. You're coaching the players on the field, but you're also still executing. And that gets you another stretch of the way. And then, I don't know, is it 50 million? Is it 75 million? There's a point where you've got to go from being on the field to off the field. You've got to go from player coach to coach, which means you're not executing anymore. Other people are executing, and those other people are also player coaching the people below them. And my point here would be that each of those transitions has a major Achilles heel that they'll surface in the leader. And a lot of leaders just are incapable of making the transition, is basically my view. Now, I think we can help people to be better at making those transitions, but there's a reason why you see people that'll start companies and then they'll spin them up to a certain size and then they'll leave and they'll go start another company. It's because they really like doing one of those stages, but they don't like progressing up the ladder. One of the reasons why people don't like progressing up the ladder, before I talk about the Achilles heels, is that when you progress up the ladder, you basically stay at the frontier of your competence. So like I can be a great player, but the moment you ask me to be a player coach, well, I don't know how to coach. I know how to throw touchdown passes. I don't necessarily know how to tell the wide receiver what to do. I know how to throw the ball. And I don't like the feeling of not being very good at doing something. I like that I'm really good at throwing the ball. And so when you are constantly at the frontier of your incompetence as the organization grows, a lot of times people are just like, either don't want to do the new job, or I don't like the feeling of not knowing what I'm doing. So here's the big ones that hang people up. From player to player coach, you've propelled the organization forward on your singular excellence or a small group of people's excellence. And now you have to multiply it. And that means you have to split time and you have to entrust people with things that they're not going to be able to do at your level. And some people are just unwilling to do it. It's just like, and here's the number one phrase you can tell somebody is not making the jump. They'll say, here, just let me do it. Here, just let me do it is code for I don't trust you. And I can do this faster than you. I can do this better than you. And every time you say, here, just let me do it, you basically rob that person of the ability to grow into who you need them to be. So a lot of people just get stuck there. And, sometimes, Sean, like it's an area that's critical enough that you shouldn't be handing it off. But if it's an area that you should, the example earlier I gave of me running Amazon ads, I can't just let them run it for a week with my coaching and then say, here, just let me do it and take it back, because now that means I'm not ever going to be able to multiply downward. The transition from player coach to coach, it's actually a much more subtle thing. That when you transition from player coach to coach, you all of a sudden don't have anything on your to-do list that you can really cross off. So your entire career as a leader up until that point has been, I got this done, right? Today I showed up, this week I showed up in the office and this thing happened. And all of a sudden you can't do that because all you're doing is talking to people and you're not crossing anything off the to-do list. You're just coaching people. And you go through this existential crisis of like, am I actually accomplishing anything? For me at Simple Modern, this actually happened during COVID and remote work. And so it exacerbated the feeling of like, my wife would ask me at the end of the day, like, how was your day? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I talked to a bunch of people, but I don't know that I got anything accomplished, right? Like, I don't have anything I can point to that I did. And so a lot of times people will just revert back to, again, doing tactical things because it at least makes them, feel like that they've got something that they can kind of hold on to, something tangible that they did. So I think most of the time the barrier is the leader not being willing to take the next step because they don't exactly know how to do it and it doesn't feel very good. One other way of saying the same thing. The things that got you here won't get you there. The things that help you get from 0 to 20 million, if you do them from 20 to 40 million, they're not as helpful. In fact, they might be mildly hurtful. And if you're doing them at 100 million, you are sabotaging your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you guys, the CEO productivity thing is such a fascinating thing. Do you guys have like an agreement tracker of some kind? Like Sean, do you have something like that? Or Mike, where like, because you're now working through people so much and that you are like, you don't do anything tactical, right? Like I keep a Notion doc of like all of the areas of the business that I am like tracking or at least talking about with people, and that there are individual docs where I can kind of like keep track of everything. Do you guys do anything like that as a CEO? Like it's my own version of productivity. It's like I need to keep track
I haven't, but that's an interesting idea. I mean, I think you're making it more concrete what you're doing.
It's just to frame up also like, I don't know how to keep track of shit. Like, and now I trust my team to do it for me. They all have rolling docs when I do one-on-ones or meet with them, but it's the only way I know how to actually think about those things independent of those people. Like if I want to put mental reps into a topic, Facebook ads, I need to put them somewhere. Even though I'm not going to be the one to do the work, I need to like have it somewhere. So if like there's a project in the business that I'm going to put reps into, that goes into my agreement tracker, my personal one. And it's like who in the business is accountable for it? Because I know I'm not. But I keep all of my thoughts in one place. It's a stupid little hack. I don't even know where I got it. I stole it from somebody. I steal everything.
No, it sounds good. I don't do that at all. I like my main value in this business is I know exactly where I want it to go and I know everything going on. And I know everything going on through, I attend a lot of meetings. I watch a lot of videos. I read our Notion and then we have weekly updates. Yeah. And the big problem right now is I know information that isn't passing to other people in the company. Like, so I'll be in a meeting and I'll hear something important, but then I'll be in another meeting and those people need that information. And like, we have to work on that.
Dude, that's like, yeah. And you don't want to be as a CEO, you never want to be a message router. That's like one of the lowest value functions in a business. Like for scale, like you just can't be that person. Right.
So we're rebuilding our stand-up meetings to like pass, and like the first one's going to happen in like 10 minutes. Like we're going to pass information hopefully more seamlessly across everything. What's up, everybody? I use Sendlane for all of my email needs. They have SMS, they have reviews, they have all that stuff. But the big, scary, hard thing to do is to switch from Klaviyo to Sendlane. And I'm telling you, I did it. They just rolled out a new feature where you do not have to pay for Sendlane until you're up live sending emails on Klaviyo, essentially de-risking the change off period, right? We kept Klaviyo up and live for probably 3 months during that transition. And now you can do that. You can move at your leisure, make sure things are set up and working, make sure they have the features you want, and only start paying when you're actually fully live on Sendlane. So if you're sick of the Klaviyo monopoly, if you're sick of rates going up and bad customer service and everything that Klaviyo has been doing for about fucking 5 years, check out Sendlane. They are the modern, fast-moving email startup. So e-commerce focused, hyper focused on winning over Shopify customers, and they know what makes us money on email for Shopify. So check them out. Sendlane. I use them. If you got an email from me, it's coming from Sendlane. What I wanted to hear from you guys is, Matt, I would love to hear what's the time you guys almost went out of business? Like, what is that? What is that little?
Probably during COVID, like the business started. We had a moment during COVID where, like that, remember the ad bump, like you could just start to scale and it's insane. So like we had a moment during COVID where PLK started to like really rip during that like ad inventory arbitrage moment. At the same time, we were investing very heavily in Lomi R&D. Like this is pre that business even being a thing. And we just chewed through so much cash because like we had one business unit in high growth mode, pushing advertising and customer acquisition, and another business in high R&D mode, but we didn't have the balance sheet for it. That almost took us out for sure. And this is like because of the R&D side of Lomi and even Peely Case early on, like we are venture backed as Mike, as I know, you know. And that's a big reason why, is to like try to finance these long cycles that there is no business to finance them at that point. I will say like one thing, Mike, that you said that makes me think about when all the near death experiences that I've had, either in these companies or even in companies I've built before, the business, like it always seems to break like at 3s and 10s, like 3 people, 10 people, 30 people, 100 people, 300 people. And I don't remember where I got that either. I'm sure I stole that too. But the thinking there is that like that's when the team dynamics change, and that's when you wind up needing like more management, more leadership. And when I was building my first company, I didn't know what any of those things were. So like when I got to 30 people, like I had no HR, I had no like actual leadership function. I was very much a version of what Sean was saying. I could just do everything on like the sheer force of will of the entrepreneur. But like as we went from 30 to 100 people, without leadership, like everything breaks. So like I have found that in my businesses, the most risk has been when we just don't scale up. When we're either too far ahead of our skis and scaling up the people side, or nowhere near what we need. So we've created an unnecessary amount of risk in the operation because we don't have the right people in place. And most of that goes back to, it's because we are not doing shit that we know that we don't even know that these are the things that we should be doing.
Yeah, you're making a great point, which is that sometimes it's like, well, I want to maximize profitability or I want to conserve cash, and so I'm going to push off new hires to the last possible moment. You might actually be creating a form of risk in and of itself, in that exactly what you're saying, that if you don't hire till the gun is to your head, a lot of times that creates the opportunity for it to go poorly. It creates the opportunity for you to settle and hire somebody more quickly than you would have otherwise. Yeah. Marissa Mayer famously said at Google that every time they grew an order of magnitude, everything broke. I think with people, it's less than an order of magnitude.
It's double. If you double your company, your people
every time you double. And I think that this is why, like, obviously not every hire is equal. I think that the attitude we've tried to take more recently has been one of, hey, we are always looking for great people. And when we find them, we are not afraid to go and hire them, even if we're not quite ready for it organizationally. We've been a little bit more proactive than reactive, simply because then it allows us to have much longer timelines on hires instead of being like, put it off. Okay, right now, we got to have it right now, because a lot of times you just won't have the great candidate right at that instant. So a great example, we have co-creative directors at this point. And one of ours came from PepsiCo, but he was interested, and we were not looking for a position, but he was perfect. It was just like, and so we brought him in and created a role for him. And very quickly we realized, this guy is destined to have a significant amount of organizational influence. So it's true, and there's sometimes it can't be helped. Sometimes like a product line takes off, and it's like you just have to scale up, but being aware that you've got as the leader, that you're just going to have to manage a lot of culture and organizational risk. And this is what most people forget. It's like the joke is that I got in business to like do business, and I didn't realize it was all managing people. But like, you can't forget that as a leader, that most of what you're doing is running a human organization, running a team. And the bigger the organization gets, the more that's true, the less that your job is actually about the business side of it, and the more it is about the people side of it.
When did you guys, what stage of your business did you guys start to truly like hire leadership in the business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say we're in that stage right now.
Oh, wow.
Like most people at the company, 80 plus W2 employees, I would say 25 of them have been here since the start. And that was just the people who came from my agency. And we have a really high retention rate on those people. I think like none of them have left. Those people have become leaders and managers over time, but we didn't hire them as that. They are tactical doers who know what it takes to run their channel. I think Sydney's a good example. She's our director of retention. Started out designing emails, running email, and then all the way up to leading our retention team, right? Then we've in the past 2 years, we've doubled, tripled, whatever in size. A lot of those people were still functional managers of a role in the business. Like, hey, I do this. Like, they weren't necessarily people managers. They were rolling up to me or Connor or somebody else. We've now just really started to hire like executive levels and VP levels that replace rolling up into one of us and actually have their own ideas of running this function. So later than most people should. But yeah, we've just started to do that.
Yeah, I would say like comparatively, and again, it's all personal. Comparatively, Sean, that's very late for like people listening, like the size of your business to just be doing that now. Now it sounds like you had awesome people that grew with the company, which is actually weirdly rare, right? To have like people who can keep pace or set pace in an organization and like always upgrade themselves. Like the business is doubling and they're somehow doubling their capacity. Super rare. Sounds like you had a bunch of those, which is amazing. Mike, what about you? When did you, I mean, you're naturally, I think, built this way, Mike, like as more leadership. That's why we think you should go for governor or president. When did you guys start to really think about like building that functionality? Maybe it's not hiring the person, but like we functionally just need leadership in the business.
Man, I did it at the very beginning. And in retrospect, it was either brilliant or really stupid. Like we got initial traction with the company. And I think we were at a crossroads where, because unlike most companies, I mean, our first year of really selling stuff, we did 10 million in revenue, and which is just crazy right out of the gates. It might have even been a little bit more. It was a much bigger number than you would have guessed for year one, and we had gotten there basically off 3 people, and we could have easily been like, "Hey, let's just freaking cash flow this." Lifestyle business, baby. And I think I had 2 thought processes. One was I really wanted to build a company. I thought the idea of being a part of a company and community, like that was appealing to me. And then secondly, I realized, hey, Amazon's hyper competitive. If we're not building a brand, then this thing is going to have a fairly short lifespan, 2, 3, 4 years. And so basically, like when we started to hire people, I went and started getting executive level people at hire 4, at the 4th person, 5th person in the organization. So we basically had a group of people, we had like 7 or 8 hires that went with those original 3. And I think 6 of them are C title people in the company right now, 7 of them. It's like it was very clearly I hired people that I thought had the ability to do it. So we had a bizarre, overhead structure where like I think early on it was like everybody made six figures at the company. There was nobody who, and so like I would never necessarily advocate for people to do this, but at the same time it was kind of like I knew the alternative because I built another company, which is what usually happens is the co-founders kind of get it off the ground and you hire whoever's available and whoever's inexpensive. And you entrust them with really important things. And then as the company grows, you have this problem of I hired people that are now in these kind of critical spots and are in charge of coaching the next generation and are just not necessarily leaders. They were just the guy that was around. And so another piece that was funny about this is like I had people that, were making $250,000 as a consultant or as an international controller before coming to the company. And now they're like reconciling QuickBooks statements, they're like whatever, haggling with the bank over a bank fee. And so there were some people that were kind of doing work that was probably way below their pay grade at first. But then as we started to grow, I had the right people in the right seats to scale the organization.
You guys are total opposite of each other. That's wild.
Yeah. I got one question to end it. Mike, you said you have 7 people with C titles, and that's just people who started. So how many executives do you have at your business?
I think we have 7 total. So 7 out of and they all came from the first 11 people in the door.
Wow.
Okay. So, what are the 7 titles?
So there's me. We have a chief, we call Brian's title Chief E-commerce. Basically think about sales. We divide it into 2 sides, a physical and digital. So Carson runs physical retail, Brian runs digital, and we have both those as C titles. We have a CFO. We have a chief culture officer who basically runs all the people, HR kind of side of the organization. We have a chief growth officer and I'm forgetting one and a chief marketing officer. That's your list.
I have so many questions, but we can save that for another episode. We can do a whole episode just on like executive structure like that at that level, because that does come in after 50. I think that might be the pod for today, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, that's a wrap. That was a fun jam. Mega difference between how Sean has built his business, Mike has built his with regards to who they hired and when. I've done it differently. Sean, I think, said this, and Mike said this too, like it's such a personal style in how you hire and when you hire and the roles you hire. So I hope that was helpful to everybody. If you are not a subscriber, please go smash the subscribe button on YouTube or Spotify. All you're doing is stroking our egos, but we like that. That's a great thing. So please continue to support the pod. We love it. You're a great audience. And as always, thank you to the sponsors of the show, Northbeam, Fulfill, and Sendlane. We don't do this without you guys. They're just great companies. Go check them out. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.